Turn with me over here to Judges chapter 21, verse 25. Judges 21, verse 25. If you want to know what we're going to study today, I want us to look at the story of Rehoboam and Jeroboam and the division of the 12 tribes of Israel. And we're going to look at that in a little bit. It's to me, a very sad time in the history of the 12 tribes, the children of Israel, and all that has developed. But first and foremost, I want to read Judges 21, verse 25, which says, "In those days there was no king in Israel, and every man did that which was right in his own eyes." Now, I happen to believe that statement, every man that did that which was right in his own eyes, is pretty prevalent today, wouldn't you say? We see that everybody does what's right in their own eyes. Who follows God? Who follows biblical principles? We better. That's really the lesson we learn from that. And of course, Judges 17:6 says the same thing, that, in those days there was no king and everybody did that which was right in their own eyes. But we do know that in Judges, God raised up what he called saviors to deliver the children of Israel, to actually fulfill all of the will of God, because as we are well aware of, it is God who's working, it is God who is fulfilling all things and taking place, and he uses men and he uses situations and circumstances, so we can't ever forget that. God is sovereign. He is the one that makes all of the decisions. He's the one that rules, directs. Now, he doesn't let us make horrible mistakes. He does allow that, for sure. We recognize and we know that. But let's go over here to what is known to let's go over here to Kings, 1 Kings 12. 1 Kings 12. Because I think there's certain lessons we must learn from what is called many times in Scripture. It's called the sin of Jeroboam. What is the sin of Jeroboam? Well, it's idolatry, number one, and there's other things involved, and we're going to see that. That's what it is. But in chapter 12, there are big lessons that we can learn from what goes on here. The history of Israel and Judah is a sad story because of this, and it's been God's contention, and you can read it in Jeremiah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. The problem with the children of Israel is they always rebelled against the Word of God. They always would rebel. Now, a few individuals were wise and they followed God, but overall the nation rebelled. The leaders led people in a wrong direction. So that's what I say. We got to be careful, because what is the direction? We don't really want to be led in a wrong direction. Anyway, they rebelled against God and what he wanted for them, the children of Israel did, and they did what was right in their own times, right in their own eyes, many times they did that. And we have instructions, and this was what God told them. You can keep your fingers there in 1 Kings 12, but you don't have to turn here, but I'm going to go back here to Deuteronomy and just lay out a couple of things here in Deuteronomy chapter 8. This was the warning. They were forgetting God. They were rebelling against God. And yet he gave them instructions, chapter 8, verse 11. He says, beware that you don't forget the Lord your God. Beware of that. In not keeping his commandments. And specifically, we're going to see some things today about a king who forgot some of the commandments of God, didn't follow them. So beware that you forget not the Lord your God in not keeping the commandments and his judgments and his statutes which I command you this day. He says, lest when you have eaten and are full and you have built goodly houses and dwell therein, and when your herds and your flocks multiply and your silver and your gold is multiplied and all that you had is multiplied. Hey, that kind of fits today, doesn't it? Aren't we basically, we're rich. Now, I know there are segments of poor people, but we're an affluent society. Everything is about affluency, and that is the drive of human beings, is to be affluent, to be rich. self-sufficient, all those things. He says, beware of that. Then, verse 14, then your heart be lifted up. Got to be careful. And you forget the Lord your God, which brought you forth out of the land of Egypt and from the house of bondage. Now this was he's giving instruction to the children of Israel. Chapter 10 says this, verse 12, chapter 10, verse 12, and now Israel, what does the Lord your God require of you but to fear the eternal your God, to walk in all his ways, and to love him and to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul? I say that should be our motivation now. That right there, that instruction. And I hope we're wise, to make sure we do that. And verse 13, to keep the commandments of the eternal and his statutes, which I command you this day. Notice this, for your good. For your good. All right, let's go to Kings. What we have here is we have a king being established, Rehoboam, and can anybody tell me who his father was? Who was Rehoboam's dad? Solomon, King Solomon. So this is Solomon's son who inherits the throne after Solomon dies. And we have here, I think this is one of the saddest leadership faux pas any leader can make, is what Rehoboam did. So I want to read this story, and we know this. This is chapter 12, beginning verse 1. It says, and Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel were come to Shechem to make him king. So this was going to be the inauguration, if you might say that. It came to pass when Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who was yet in Egypt, heard of it, for he had fled from the presence of King Solomon and Jeroboam. It's interesting because when he fled to Egypt, he married the Pharaoh's daughter. And there were certain things that he learned about the Egyptian gods. This is Jeroboam. And by the way, he was chased, you might say, out of Israel into Egypt because Solomon heard that God was wanting to work with him, wanting to do things with him. And we'll read that in just a second. So it says in chapter 12, verse 2, and it came to pass when Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who was yet in Egypt, heard of it, for he had fled from the presence of King Solomon, and Jeroboam dwelt in Egypt, that they sent and called him, and Jeroboam and all the congregation of Israel came, and they spoke unto Rehoboam. Now, God had already told Jeroboam that God was going to be doing some certain things with him. And we read this in chapter 11, verse 30. This is just a little background, and maybe not as cohesive as it could be, but there's a backstory to Jeroboam coming up to Rehoboam and talking to him. And he already knows certain things. He already knows that God's going to rend the kingdom from Rehoboam and give it to him. Verse 30 of chapter 11 says, and Ahijah caught up, verse 29, it came to pass at that time when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem that the prophet Ahijah the Shilonite found him in the way, and he had clad himself with a new garment, and they too were alone in the field. So just the two of them. So you have Ahijah and Jeroboam. They're together. And Ahijah caught the new garment that was on him, and he rent it into 12 pieces. And he said to Jeroboam, take you 10 pieces, for thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, behold, I will rend the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and will give 10 tribes to thee. But he shall have one tribe, verse 32, for my servant David's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, and the city I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, because that they have forsaken me and have worshipped. This is talking about what Rehoboam and all of the tribes are doing. They are now have worshipped Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Zidians. Chemosh, the god of the Moabites, and Milcom, the god of the children of Ammon. What did he's always said, don't go after the other gods, the gods of other nations. And here we have a leader that is leading people to worship other gods besides God. How horrible is that? Anyway, Abijah says, and have not walked in my ways to do that which is right in mine eyes, and to keep my statutes and my judgments as did David their father. Howbeit, I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hands, but I will make him prince all the days of his life for David, my servant's sake, whom I chose, because he kept my commandments and my statutes. Yea, David, he kept my commandments and my statutes. But I will take the kingdom out of his son's hand, and will give it unto you, even the 10 tribes. This was an honor. This was an honor. And unto his son will I give one tribe, and David my servant may have a light before me in Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen. They put my name there, and I will take you, and you shall reign according to all that your soul desires, and shall be king over Israel. And it shall be, if you will hearken unto all that I command you, and will walk in my ways, and do that which is right in my eyes, to keep my statutes and my commandments, as David my servant did, that I will be with you and build you a sure house as I have built for David, and will give Israel unto you. And I will for this afflict the seed of David, but not forever. And then verse 40 says, and Solomon sought to kill Jeroboam, and Jeroboam arose and fled to Egypt. So now we're picking up the story where he is now coming back out of Egypt, married unto Pharaoh's daughter, and having learned about some of their gods and things like that. So they come to Shechem to make Rehoboam king. In verse 2 again, chapter 12, verse 2. And it came to pass when Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who was yet in Egypt, heard of it, for he was fled from the presence of Solomon, and Jeroboam dwelt in Egypt, that they sent and called him, and Jeroboam and all the congregation of Israel came and spoke unto Rehoboam. Remember this story? And the father and they said, thy father made our yoke grievous. Talking about Solomon. Certain things about that make me really sad about Solomon, because he started out in such a good manner. When God came to Solomon when he was about to be king, he says, what will you? And he said, give me wisdom that I may rule this thy so great a people. That's what he asked for. And maybe this is just the way we humans are. He had that moment when it was good, and yet what happened later. It says, your father, talking about Solomon, made our yoke grievous. Now therefore, because now you're about to be made king, Rehoboam, make you the grievous service of thy father and his heavy yoke which you have put upon us lighter, and we will serve you. And he said unto them, depart for 3 days, and come again to me, and I'll give you an answer. And so they departed. And Rehoboam, King Rehoboam, consulted with the old men that stood before Solomon his father while he was yet alive. And he said, how do you advise that I may answer this people? This was a good thing for him to ask. If we are kings, we would want the advice of those who have gone before us, the good counselors, wouldn't we? Those who have had wisdom. Yes, you certainly would think that. And they said unto him, if you will be a servant unto this people this day, and will serve them, and answer them, and speak good words to them, then they will be your servant forever. Now that should have been all he should have needed right there. That should have been all that he needed in this endeavor. But what did he do? But he forsook the counsel of the old men, which they had given him, and consulted with the young men that were grown up with him, and which stood before him. And by the way, Jeroboam was known as a mighty man of valor. So he was a warrior. He was a fighter. And he's asking the advice of all the young men who probably don't have the wisdom of their fathers. They have a vision and they have a look at things. And he says, and he asked them, he says, what counsel give you that we may answer this people who have spoken to me, saying, make the yoke of your father, that your father put upon us, lighter. And the young men that were grown up with him spoke unto him, saying, thus shall you speak unto this people, and this shall you speak unto this people that spoke unto you, saying, thy father made our yoke heavy, but make it lighter unto us. Thus shall you say unto them, ready for this, my little finger shall be thicker than my father's loins. In other words, if you think that you had it tough then, I'm going to make it tougher. And now, whereas my father did lade you with heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father has chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. Now, if you're a people wanting to have a lighter yoke and peace and a new king and a new start, and this could be great, and then you hear this, what would be your reaction? Well, it probably is the same reaction as like, we're out of here. So Jeroboam and all the people came unto Rehoboam the third day. This is verse 12. And the king had appointed, saying, come to me again in the third day. And the king answered the people roughly, and forsook the old men's counsel that he gave them. And he spoke to them after the counsel of the young men, saying, my father made your yoke heavy, and I will add to your yoke. My father also chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. Wherefore the king hearkened not unto the people, for this cause was from the Eternal. God was driving this split, and so maybe God knew that this was the way it would be, or maybe he even, orchestrated it. But the cause was from the Eternal, that he might perform his saying, which the Lord spoke unto Ahijah the Shilonite, unto Jeroboam the son of Nebat. So what do they do? What do they do? So when all Israel saw that the king hearkened not unto them, the people answered the king, saying, what portion have we in David? Neither have we an inheritance in the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel. Now see to your own house, David. So Israel departed unto their tents. But there were a few of those that dwelt, of the children of Israel that dwelt in the cities of Judah, and Rehoboam, they stayed with Rehoboam. So we have a split here. We have a split. We have the north, Jeroboam ruling over 10. We have Rehoboam ruling over Judah and Benjamin. It's a split. It's a horrible time. And then Rehoboam wants to go to war with them. This is the story there in verse 21 through 24. But God says, no, don't do that. Go back. Go back to your tents. Let it be. Let it be. And then we read, beginning here in verse 25, what Jeroboam does. And I think in this we'll begin to pick up the sin of Jeroboam and what it is that we need to learn, the lessons we need to learn from this, and to never be like he was. So then it says, then Jeroboam, verse 25, built Shechem in Mount Ephraim, and dwelt therein, and went out from thence, and built Penuel. And Jeroboam said in his heart. Now remember we read, every man did that which was right in his own eyes. Jeroboam said in his heart, kind of the same phrase, same thing. Now shall the kingdom return unto the house of David. If this people go up to do sacrifice in the house of the Eternal at Jerusalem, then shall the hearts of the people turn again unto their Lord. So he's beginning to manipulate and calculate some things here. Even unto Rehoboam, king of Judah, he didn't want that to happen. And they shall kill me and go again to Rehoboam, king of Judah. Whereupon the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold and said unto them, it is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold your gods, O Israel, which brought you out of the land of Egypt. That's what he's saying about, these golden calves. Behold, your gods, O Israel, which brought you forth out of the land of Egypt. And he set up one in Bethel, and the other he put in Dan. Now I have to ask the question here. Do you see anything biblical going on here? Do you see anything following the commands of God going on here? He doesn't want to go worship in Jerusalem where the temple is, because then all the people would return. So he decides he's going to build a city, and he's going to set up his own temple, have his own priests, and have his own, own gods. And this is and this thing became a sin, what he had done. For the people went to worship before one, even unto Dan. And he made a house of high places, and made priests of the lowest of the people, which were not of the sons of Levi. And you might say, this is incredulous. I can't believe this is going on. Well, I say the same thing. I can't believe this. How could a king of Israel do this? Well, here's an interesting fact. Of all the kings of Israel, beginning with Jeroboam, none of them followed God. None of them did that which was right in God's eyes. None of the kings of Israel. Now, if you go to Rehoboam and you go to out of the house of Judah and the kings that followed him, there were I think 6 out of 20, like Josiah, and a few others that did that which was right in the eyes of the Eternal, but the rest didn't. So this is a dark time. This is a dark time where people aren't following God. I mean, no wonder he's upset. No wonder, that he's mad. And he's setting up this northern kingdom for failure because he's not wanting to follow the things of God. So he comes up with his own plan. He sets up centers of worship in Bethel and Dan with the golden calf. Now, what does that remind you of? Right, when Exodus, when Moses and Joshua went up to get receive the 10 Commandments, what did they do? Well, they got Aaron to make what? A golden calf, right? So and then he has the nerve to say, these are the gods which brought you up out of the land of Egypt. It's like, where has he been? Where is he? Doesn't he know anything about the things of God? And telling the people, we're going to have these calves and you can worship. It's too far for you to go to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, Israel. So he sets up shrines in the high places. He installed a priesthood that were not of the tribes of Levi. And then verse 32 says, and Jeroboam ordained a feast in the 8th month. He decided that what they needed was the Feast of Tabernacles in the 8th month. So, now is there any instruction from God that there be what do we read in Leviticus? It's pretty specific, isn't it? But no, he decides he's going to establish, a feast in the 8th month on the 15th day of the month. So he got the day right, just a month late, like unto the feast that is in Judah, and he offered upon the altar, sacrificing unto the calves that he had made, and he placed in Bethel the priest of the high places which he had made. So he offered upon the altar which he had made in Bethel on the 15th day of the 8th month. So, in spite of God offering to establish his dynasty in Israel, what did Jeroboam do? He chose idolatry, and the prophet Ahijah told Jeroboam that his family would not endure. And because of this sin, because of what he did, his whole family lineage was wiped out, erased. He had no children. Everything was wiped out. Family was wiped out. Now, I say this because we read in Revelation, it says that we are going to be kings and priests and serve with God for 1,000 years. Would we be like Jeroboam? Well, we can even bring that to today and in the lives that we lead now. Are there any things that we do that are like Jeroboam? Is there anything that, every man did that which is right in his own eyes? Do we do that? I mean, it's a question I think we all have to think about and ponder. Do we do that which is right in our own eyes? Or are we dedicated to following God and following the Bible and following His commands and following what He and where He's going? It's crazy that, in Judah, every other generation or so, a great king stepped forward and turned the people back to the truth and back to God. Will we be those? Will we always be turning people back to truth and back to God and bringing peace and, the great things of God? Because Jeroboam didn't do that, and Rehoboam was turning people away from God as well in the kingdoms. I mean, it's so clear why the prophets, speak so harshly from God, or God speaks to the prophets unto the tribes in Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel about these things. And it's no wonder that, and I find it interesting too, this is just an interesting side note, but why in the world would Jeroboam go to Egypt and marry the Pharaoh's daughter? Don't you know that seemed like a coup to Egypt, right? Because we know that Shishak comes up from Egypt and he causes and he has some victories. So there's a lot of things that are behind the scenes that we don't get. We don't see all of that. But the sin of Jeroboam, look what he did. It's interesting because he must have distrusted God, because God said He was going to give him the dynasty and the kingdom, and He says, if you will follow after me, I will, the people will follow you forever. But instead, every man did that which was right in his own eyes. He decided that he would trust in his own skill rather than God's favor. And so he sets up this false worship system. Scripture has a lot to say about that. It's interesting, you can read in Matthew, because the path of simple obedience is straight and narrow. Straight is the way and narrow is the gate that leads unto life. We're told that, right? Straight is the way, narrow is the gate. Or narrow is the gate, straight is the way. However it reads that. And few there be that find it. I mean, how many just say, do my will and trust me? I mean, we will do your will and we will trust you, Father. I mean, is that in our mind? I hope so. I mean, isn't that really the lesson in life, that we follow God? And why is it that we're so slow to learn that? It's stories like this, that 1 Corinthians 10 says, these things were given unto us that we might learn from them and not be like they were. And we don't want to be like Jeroboam. We don't want to be like he was, who led people away from God. Would you ever want to establish your own Feast of Tabernacles in a different month than God commanded? I mean, some of it just seems appalling and amazing, doesn't it? But it was of God. Well, I will say this, that Jeroboam isn't the only one that has done that. Jeroboam isn't the only one that has chosen not to follow God. Remember the story of Saul? Remember the story of Saul? Why would Saul take it upon himself, because Samuel didn't show up quick enough after 7 days, that he took it upon himself to offer the burnt offerings and the peace offerings? Was that given to him? Was that his job? Why would he think that he could do that? He usurped what Samuel was given to do. It's horrible. What about, he was told to go smite the Amalekites. I just got to turn over here to 1 Samuel chapter 15. This is one of the most amazing chapters in the Bible, because the way it is written, it appears that Saul really thought, in verse 14 it says, and Samuel said, because he was told to wipe out the Amalekites, kill everybody, man, woman, and child, and animals, Well, did he do that? No, he brings back the king. And then verse 14, and Samuel said, what means then the bleating of the sheep in my ears and the lowing of oxen, which I hear? Verse 13, Samuel said to Saul, and Saul said unto him, blessed be you of the Lord. I have performed the commandment of the Lord. Oh yeah, well, why do I hear the bleating of sheep? Why do I hear all of that? Saul, what's going on here? And Saul said, they have brought them from the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the sheep and the oxen to sacrifice unto the Lord your God. Is that what God had said to do? No, they took that upon themselves. He took it upon themselves to let them do that. Was that following the instruction he was given? It obviously not. And verse 19, wherefore did you not obey the voice of the Lord, but did fly upon the spoil and did evil in the sight of the Lord? And Saul said to Samuel, yes, I have obeyed the voice of the Lord. How could he say that? I mean, did he really think that in his mind? Is he so blinded? It's an amazing story. It's an amazing chapter when we read about that. And you know, the big verse is chapter 22, where Samuel said, has the Lord as great offering and burnt sacrifice offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord. That's better, obeying the voice of the Lord. Well, what about us? What will we do as kings and priests in the future when we reign with him? Do we recognize, I guess this is the big thing to recognize. Do we recognize God's sovereignty? Do we recognize, and what does that mean, God's sovereignty? Well, what that means is it's the idea that God has the power, wisdom, and authority to rule over all his creation. Isn't that what the sovereignty of God is? And he does. He rules over all of it, including all things and every possibility. Now, does he let us make mistakes? Does he give man the opportunity to make mistakes and to make choices? Yes. He said in Deuteronomy 30, I set before you life and death, choose life. He always gives us opportunities to make the right choices. The right choices. That's what he wants. Because he wants men and women of character who will follow him and recognize his sovereignty, that he rules over all things and that he directs all things. And he wants those who will recognize that and will serve him in that way. He has the sovereignty over me and you, all of us. And guess what? We are to submit to him and his sovereignty and to his words. Because we really don't want to have any kind of frame of mind, he did that which was right in his own eyes. Where in the world will we ever want that in our lives? No, we want to submit to his authority. And that we would stay within God's will, stay within his will. Now, I'm going to mention these and just ask you to study them on your own. Remember the parable of the talents? Where the king, the owner, leaves to his servants his goods and all his everything, and he goes away. And then he comes back and he wants to have an account of how they have done with that. And we will have an accountability to God for what we have done with all that he has given us. I would love to give a sermon one of these days, and maybe when I do a 2 and 3 apart, I'll do it on the subject of stewardship. Stewardship. But what about us? You know, Matthew 25 and Luke 19 talk about the parable of the talents. And, you know, to one was given 10, and he increased 10, to another 5, and then 2. And then there was the one who took his talent, and what did he do with it? He buried it. And he didn't do anything with it. Maybe he did that which was right in his own eyes. He didn't want to use that. I don't know. But it's a serious thing for us to contemplate. What will we do and how will we answer God? What accountability will he have of us when he shows up? Ecclesiastes 12 says this. These stories to me really shake me up because of how men could get so far off base. I know that you, like me, we do not want to be off base with God. When we stand before Him, we want to find favor. We want to hear these words, "Well done, you good and faithful steward. Inherit the kingdom." Don't we want to hear that? We don't want to take what He has given us and come up with our own ideas and go our own direction. We don't want that. The bottom line of it here, Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 13 says, "Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man." Fear God. Now, it isn't that we tremble. No, that is, we respect God. We have total respect for God and all His ways and commandments and statutes and judgments. Everything about God we love, Fear, we have respect unto it. "For God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil." It's going to happen. So, fear God and keep His commandments. In Deuteronomy chapter 4, I just mentioned this, verses 1 and 2, especially verse 2 of Deuteronomy 4 says, "You shall not add unto the word which I command you, neither shall you diminish aught from it." That's what He told the children of Israel. You don't add anything to this, and you don't take anything away from it. And you don't come up with your own religious system like Jeroboam did. How horrible that is. And let's read as we conclude over here in Revelation chapter 22. Because I know we all want to be found faithful servants of God. These are really great lessons for us to learn from so that we can make sure we follow the right path and make the right choices. Verse 14 of Revelation 22 says, "Blessed are they that do His commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life." That's what we want. "And may enter into the gates into the city." That's what we want. Into the city of God, heavenly Jerusalem. That's what we want. Then verse 18, "I testify unto every man that hears the words of the prophecy of this book." And that could mean the book of Revelation, but it could mean the whole book, the 66. "If any man shall add unto these things, God shall add unto him the plagues that are written in this book. If any man shall take away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God shall take away his part out of the book of life." Ooh. "And out of the holy city and from the things which are written in this book." So when we look at the story of Jeroboam and the horrible things that happened, and we find his example, let's make sure we're not like that. Let's make sure we fear God, keep His commandments. Let's not let the phrase, "every man did that which was right in his own eyes," even enter our mind. Let's follow God wholeheartedly. Let's keep the words of His scriptures perfectly as we can. I know that we stumble, and we have an advocate for that. But let's make sure that we follow God wholeheartedly and make sure that we receive that which He has promised us, which is eternal life. And then when we're kings and priests, let's be faithful to teach those which come up and those that we have opportunity to help, that we will teach them to follow the things of God.